Blood and Ashes at the Danube, the Revolt of the Iazyges. Section 1. The River that Divided Empires. The Danube in the early 2nd century was more than just a river. It was a border, a lifeline, and a living witness to the constant tension between the Roman Empire and the restless tribes beyond. Its waters glittered under the pale spring sun, flowing silently between dense forests and endless plains. On its southern bank, the disciplined legions of Rome stood watch, their camps laid out in perfect order, smoke curling from the cookfires in neat rows. On the northern bank, the land of the Iazyges stretched into a wild and boundless horizon, a place where the wind sang through the tall grasses and the sky seemed impossibly vast. For decades, an uneasy peace had held between Rome and the Iazyges, a Sarmatian people known for their fearsome horsemen and iron resolve. They were bound to Rome by treaties, trade, and a grudging respect for the legion's might. But under the surface, old resentments festered resentments, born of Roman arrogance, land disputes, and heavy tribute demands. As the Danube thawed from its winter freeze, the river carried more than just water downstream. It carried whispers of revolt. Section 2. Riders of the Endless Steppe. The Iazyges were not a people of cities or stone walls. They lived in felt-covered wagons and wooden huts scattered across the steppe, following their herds and hunting the wild game that roamed the plains. Their warriors were forged in the saddle from childhood, their lives inseparable from their horses. Each rider carried a long lance, a curved sword, and a composite bow, and they could rain arrows upon an enemy while galloping at full speed. In the evenings, fires blazed in the camp, and stories were told, stories of ancestors who had faced Alexander's successors, of victories over Dacians and rival tribes, and of battles with Rome herself. They remembered the time when they had allied with the Dacians against Emperor Domitian, forcing Rome into concessions. The elders spoke of how treaties were merely pauses in an eternal struggle, not a promise of peace. Now, younger voices began to question why they still bent the knee to Rome at all. Section 3. Rome's Iron Hand. In the year 171 Rome's grip on the Danube frontier was strained. The Marcomannic Wars had erupted, and Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself was on campaign in the north. The legions were stretched thin, their focus divided among multiple enemies. For the Iazyges, this was the moment they had been waiting for. But it was not merely weakness that stoked the fires of rebellion, it was the insult of taxation. Roman officials demanded more horses, more grain, and more warriors to serve as auxiliaries in distant wars. The tribute caravans crossed the Danube under the watchful eyes of centurions, loaded with goods the Iazyges considered their own. Every sack of grain sent south was a meal stolen from their children. Every horse taken was a blow to their pride. Section 4. The Spark in the Campfire. One cold night, in a camp deep in the plains, the chieftains gathered in a circle. Around them, warriors stood in the shadows, listening in tense silence. At the center of the circle, a man named Arpax rose to speak. Tall and broad-shouldered, his hair braided, and his armor dented from many campaigns. Arpax had fought alongside Romans in the past and learned both their strengths and weaknesses. "They are few," he told the gathered leaders, his voice carrying over the crackle of the fire. "Their emperor fights far from here. Their camps are thin, their horses weary. The Danube is no wall to a determined rider. If we strike now, we strike as free men." There was silence for a heartbeat, then a murmur, then a roar of approval. Spears thudded into the frozen ground. The decision was made. Section 5. The First Blood. Before dawn, a band of Iazyges horsemen slipped through the mists along the river. They crossed at a ford known only to the tribes and fell upon a Roman supply convoy. The clash was swift and brutal. Arrows whistled through the morning air, and the Roman escort was cut down before they could form a proper defense. The wagons were set aflame, their contents either stolen or destroyed. News of the attack spread like wildfire. Roman patrols vanished in the forests. Watchtowers were found abandoned, their garrisons slain. The Danube frontier, once so secure, was suddenly alive with fear. Section 6. Rome's Answer. In Carnuntum, the provincial governor received word of the revolt. He dispatched riders south to request reinforcements and sent orders to every cohort along the river to tighten defenses. But Rome's response was hampered by distance, winter weather, and the sheer speed of the Iazyges cavalry. The rebels struck where the legions were weakest, avoiding strongholds and targeting supply lines. Meanwhile, Marcus Aurelius, encamped far away on another front, was forced to divert troops from other campaigns to the Danube. The emperor understood the danger. If the revolt spread, the entire northern frontier could unravel. Section 7. The Winter Campaign. Snow fell thick upon the plains, muffling sound and slowing movement. The Romans, unused to the vast openness of the steppe, struggled in the harsh conditions. The Iazyges, however, moved like shadows across the snow, vanishing before the legions could bring them to battle. Entire villages south of the river lived in fear, their stores plundered, their people carried off. The Iazyges sought not merely to win battles, but to starve the Romans out, breaking their will through constant raids. It was war as the steppe understood it, not the clash of armies in a single decisive battle, but a slow bleed of strength and morale. Section 8. The Ambush at the Frozen Ford. In late winter, the Romans attempted to push a column north across the Danube to retaliate. Arpax and his riders waited. As the legionaries trudged across the frozen river, the ice groaned beneath their boots and hooves. The Iazyges struck from the tree line, arrows cutting into the tightly packed ranks. The Romans tried to form a shield wall, but the ice cracked under their weight. Men and horses plunged into the freezing water as the Iazyges pressed the attack. By the time the survivors staggered back to the southern bank, the Danube was littered with bodies and shattered gear. The river itself seemed to have claimed Rome's dead. Section 9. Rome Strikes Back. When spring came, so did Rome's vengeance. Marcus Aurelius personally led the legions north, bringing not only infantry, but heavy cavalry from allied tribes. The Romans built pontoon bridges, fortified camps deep in enemy territory, and cut a swath through the steppe. Villages were burned, herds seized, and captives taken. But the Iazyges did not meet them in open battle. They harried the columns, attacked at night, and set fire to the grasslands to blind and slow their enemy. The Danube frontier became a wasteland of ashes and bones. Section 10. The Siege of the Riders. Eventually, the Romans managed to corner a large force of Iazyges near the ruins of a Dacian hillfort. With the plains behind them and the legions before them, the Iazyges faced their greatest trial. For 3 days, the two sides clashed horse against spear, arrow against shield. The hillfort's blackened stones ran red with blood. On the 4th day, Arpax himself fell, pierced by a Roman pilum. His death broke the spirit of many warriors, and the survivors slipped away into the night, leaving the field to the legions. Section 11. The Bitter Peace. The Iazyges were forced to the negotiating table. Rome demanded heavy tribute, hostages, and military service in future campaigns. The proud horsemen who had once defied the legions now rode in Roman ranks, fighting wars far from their homeland. But the peace was uneasy. The Iazyges knew Rome would never truly trust them, and Rome knew the steppe tribes would never truly be subdued. Section 12. Echoes along the Danube. Years later, travelers along the Danube still spoke of the winter when the river froze and the plains burned. They told of ghostly riders glimpsed in the morning mists, of arrows that fell from nowhere, and of villages that vanished overnight. The revolt of the Iazyges became a story passed from soldier to soldier, a reminder that beyond the river lay a land where Rome's laws meant nothing, and where the wind carried the scent of blood and ashes. And so the Danube flowed on, eternal and indifferent, carrying the memories of war in its dark waters, as both empire and tribe faded into history.